You are listening to Get Real Podcast.
What we're going to do today is something that was bound to happen. We are going to interview an artist, Barry Dreir. His project is Reflection of Glory. And when I got an email response back from him, he's like, "Hey, Unpastor Glenn." It kind of took me by surprise and found out that he has listened. Yes, we do have listeners, people. At least one that listened at one time.
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle. We have Barry Dreir from Reflection of Glory. Barry, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you guys?
Doing really well.
Good.
Reflection of Glory. Everything that I've seen that you do with your project just has a finesse to it, and I really like that. And you're in the symphonic metal zip code. I think that's kind of how we cross paths a little bit. But you did not start out with symphonic metal. You started out as a singer-songwriter. Can you share with our listeners a little bit about your journey in music, where you started, and how you made that turn to symphonic metal?
Oh, sure. Yeah, because on the surface, it seems like quite a turn, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah. But as far as getting my start in music, I mean, music has always been a part of my life. I've been in music lessons, all throughout growing up. In college, I got a music degree, and now I actually work in music ministry. That's my day job. But the transition from going from, singer-songwriter, just the guy with a guitar, to doing the symphonic metal thing, that was a conscious decision. I've loved both styles of music for a long time, and it's not as big of a change, I think, as sometimes it seems on the surface. One of the songs that sucked me into symphonic metal was The Islander by Nightwish, which is very much, it's got that acoustic vibe to it. And then I also thought of it once I decided, hey, let's do some symphonic metal. It was a little bit of it was a challenge. Playing the metal guitar is a lot harder than just strumming some chords, and doing the full orchestrations and mixing and producing all that is much more involved than just doing a guy and guitar. And so it was kind of a challenge to myself, like, hey, can I even do this, and can I do it well? And for me, I guess the jury's still out on that, so we'll see.
Well, if you didn't do it well, you wouldn't be on the Get Real podcast. So,
well, there you go. That's the ultimate standard.
We're very particular about who we bring on. It's not just anybody that can carry a tune somewhat in a wheelbarrow and strum a guitar. Notice how my music has never been featured on this show. So.
What he really means is, like, if you have a Christmas album, you pretty much get on, right?
Oh, okay.
Christmas.
Well, good thing I did that.
Yeah, Glenn. Hey, I love it. I love that bass work. The ones that I was listening to, it was like, that was really beautiful.
Well, thanks.
How does the singer-songwriter, how has that helped you in composing, and that's the word I'm going to use, composing symphonic metal?
Well, I mean, there's some things that are still the same, no matter what. Like the song structure, how you go from verse, choruses, bridge, hooks, whatever, harmonies, chord progressions, all of that is still the same. So in that sense, I'm still a singer-songwriter, but just the icing on top of the cake is different. But all that has less to do with being a singer-songwriter and more to do with just being a musician, because you don't have to be in any one style of music to have a good grasp of those fundamental things that makes the song work.
Music is really what it comes down to in a lot of ways. Yeah. And then when you have the Spirit moving through you, inspiring you, that's one of the things that I've come to realize in myself. Yeah, the zip code I hang out in a lot is symphonic metal, the metal genre, but I appreciate everything that's just good music, especially music that glorifies Jesus. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the genre is. If it glorifies the Lord and there's talent and gifting behind it, I'm all into it. I mean, we've interviewed soul musicians, gospel musicians. We've interviewed R&B, hip hop, and the thread that runs through all of it is you just really hear the heart of the Lord and a heart towards the Lord in that particular music that they're doing. It doesn't matter what the genre is.
Yeah.
On your website, you make a very profound statement. I would not expect anything less than profound from somebody who does symphonic metal. You put this on here, and I did some thinking about it. You said that music is a reflection of the musician and the musician's life, and mine, meaning yours, is no different. So what does the message, the structure, the sound of your music say about you in particular, especially in the context of symphonic metal? There's a lot going on there.
That's a tough question, Glenn. No pressure, Barry.
And you've got 2 minutes to answer it. No,
no pressure, Barry.
No pressure, especially since he's quoting my own quote back at me.
Yeah, no kidding. This guy.
So I better have a good answer, right? Obviously, that whole quote has to do with the concept behind the artist's name, Reflection of Glory, that I chose intentionally. I didn't use my own name like lots of Christian artists do, but I wanted to communicate this idea that this music is a reflection of something. It's not about me, but it's about something else. And the message of that is I should hope that it's most obvious. As a Christian, I'm called to use whatever I have to serve and to honor God. And how could I write about anything else after what Jesus has done to save me, to change my life, to take me out of what I used to be, and to put me on a path towards growing to be more like Him? And I think for all musicians, we write what we know. Whether what is true in our lives or what we want to be true for our lives or whatever captures our imagination. And, for Christians, our faith, our Christianity is supposed to consume our lives and kind of be present in everything we do.
So basically what is happening is what God is doing in you is what's coming out of you that you express through your music is what I'm picking up on.
Yeah, and there's one verse in particular that always comes to my mind where Jesus says, it's out of the overflow of the heart that the mouth speaks.
That's very true, and that's true in song.
Yeah.
And that leads me to my next question. I wanted to get your perspective on this because without question, you've been inspired by some of my heroes in the metal genre, Kamelot being one of them.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
Nightwish. And what is it that you hear coming out of them that they're reflecting from your perspective?
Well, that's...
Man, Glenn in these questions, man.
Yeah,
I want to know.
Hey, Barry, I apologize, dude. I don't even know this guy. I just kind of wandered in off the street, and this guy with all this sharp
Give me a week
questions
vacation and look what happens.
Yeah.
Get back on my A game.
Lithos cried, digging in with the scalpel.
No, but it's great.
All right, Barry, let's hear it.
That question, I think that question works so much better for like symphonic metal bands than it does for like a lot of pop artists that are kind of the commercially, the music machine is churning them out, and there's not a whole lot of substance to their music. Where for Kamelot and Nightwish and Epica, like there's so much meat to what they do, and each band has got a different flavor, a different twist. Even if you think about the career for any of those bands, there's been different flavors for different stages of their careers. And I think of a band like Epica, where they deal with really like high philosophy, these really grand esoteric ideas in their lyrics, and that really fits the style of symphonic metal really well, because it's got the grand scale of the music and the associations with the classical academic culture, and dealing with the nature of reality and humanity. All of that goes together, and they're writing what they as humans, what captivates, what their minds go to and obsess on and ponder, and that shows up in their lives as songwriters and as musicians.
And that's spiritual.
That is spiritual.
It's like you're sitting there under the sky dealing with consciousness and singing about it.
Yeah.
That's spiritual in a way.
Yeah.
It's interesting how you bring up Epica, because I'm, of course, a big Epica fan and have been for several years. It was a band that kind of had to grow on me a little bit because I had to work through some of the stuff that the growls, and God brought me to a place where I understood what that was and what that was expressing. And you have to study their music, their lyrics, to understand not what they're saying, but what they're trying to convey. It's an academic work to do. Mm-hmm. It's not just like, oh yeah, I'm going to throw this on and enjoy a, Epica album for a little bit to kind of unwind. It's a mental challenge. Of course, I mean, the guitar riffs are great and everything like that, but it's a work. And then once you finally grasp onto where they're going with it, one of the things that I found very interesting about them is just, I think it was about a year ago, they re-released some of their music as jazz music.
Oh yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, and I was like, wait a minute, what's this left turn at Albuquerque? And again, that's really spiritual. It's like, now we're going to express it the way that we want to and what's stirring in us. And you know what? Quite frankly, we really don't care about the genre. We're just going to do what we're going to do because we're musicians.
It kind of fits, really, to me. I mean, you think about jazz. Not everybody gets it, but if you do get it, it's like it's over here, right? And almost like if you're honestly dealing with all this serious subject matter, it's a little bit off the beaten path. Yeah. And people don't like dealing with things that aren't just sugary sweet or aren't just self-actualizing or just petting you, right? And to branch off of that and get to wax elaborate or to get like a little bit, that totally makes sense why a more complex genre would fit Epica. Yeah. I get it. I totally get it.
And jazz is very mathematical.
I love jazz. I don't know why, but some people hate it. I love it, and I don't know why. I'm not that good at math. Yeah. I was good at trigonometry.
Were you?
Yeah, I was.
I was horrible at all math classes.
Oh, really?
I was.
Calculus I wasn't a friend of calculus.
I wasn't a friend of any of it.
Barry, you're good at math, right? Are you good at math?
Math's not my favorite.
Okay.
Hey. Now we have true fellowship. Did you feel it in the room? We have true fellowship right now.
Yep.
And with that expression that's coming out of these other bands such as Kamelot, Nightwish, Epica, is there a particular song that they've done that you're like, whoa, this is so close to the gospel truth, I wish I could run over there and tell them the rest of the story? Or it just kind of stirs in you. It's like, oh, they're almost there. I just need to pray them through just a little bit more. Is there one particular song that really just strikes you that way?
Oh, that's a tough one. Because first gut reaction, it seems more often to me that those bands are pretty far away from the gospel. Yeah, I think of Nightwish, especially in their last two most recent albums, have really explored naturalism, and some of their songs have been pretty explicitly anti-Christian in their content. But I think in general, Kamelot draws the most on Christian themes and imagery, and probably gets the closest to what the content of the gospel is. And I think if I were to actually get to having a conversation, it would be easiest to start with Kamelot and to use their songs as a platform to discuss the gospel, because at least they use the kind of language that connects with gospel ideas, like the idea of sacrifice on behalf of someone else, and the themes of guilt versus innocence, and heaven versus hell, the salvation versus condemnation. They deal with those concepts and in a depth that I think the other bands in the genre don't go to.
One of my favorite Kamelot songs is Abandon.
Oh, yeah.
The one that Roy Khan did with them. And it's interesting you say that, because the former lead singer of Kamelot was saved, in 2010? Roy Khan?
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he got born again,
no way.
man.
Yeah, he got born again.
And
so
to me,
Yeah.
the best vocalist. I love Roy Khan. I mean, he can
awesome.
sing, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, he really got saved.
Yeah, he was miraculously saved.
You know what, Barry? It's like, I remember Glenn and I have been to a few Nightwish shows, and when we were in them, and they were doing Forms Most
Endless
Beautiful.
Forms Most Beautiful.
Endless Forms Most Beautiful. And they have
Yeah.
the quintessential British, smart guy, Richard Dawkins,
Yeah.
doing this narrative and all this. And neo-Darwinism is ridiculous. It's moronic, to me. But the fact that they were looking,
Yeah.
because most people don't even look. They're so busy on their phone. They don't look at an ant. They don't look at all the nerdery around them that would stoke the fear of God, right? And the fact that they were like completely stoked off biology and all these forms and space and just all of this different stuff, I got chill bumps, even though it was using Dawkins, which I think is God bless him. I think it's nonsense. It's ridiculous. To even suggest that everything fell together, the eye created itself.
Absolutely.
It's ridiculous.
Impossible.
But the fact that they even were celebrating creation, even in such brazen ignorance, chill bumped me out, dude.
Yeah.
It really did.
And it's so different from what we grew up with Twisted Sister.
Glam rock.
Glam rock.
Oh, what we put up with until Pearl Jam came and rescued us, it was like, or probably Guns N' Roses.
Guns N' Roses.
But everything before then, it was like lipstick and
it was
just,
horrible.
3 belts and just like, we're not gonna take it. And we didn't take it.
No.
We held on. But didn't you experience that?
Yeah,
a little bit of chill
I did too.
bumpery?
And I still do.
And because if I hear Richard Dawkins, I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. But I look at it, I'm not at all intimidated by elegant sounding neo-Darwinists as they try to make me seem as if I'm a moron for believing in Jesus. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't bother me in the least bit. I think it's stupid. I think of like, how did the eyeball progress? And
I'm going to write a song about it.
Yeah, typically. But it's like, think about what if you were the first creeping thing to get an eyeball? Just one, not 2. You get one hanging off of you,
Yeah.
I've heard somebody say I'm sure that was easy to get a date with a halfway formed eyeball hanging off of your head.
Baby.
Or maybe heads were new. It's like you're the first guy on the block with a head and an eyeball and you're like, hey, baby. It's like sexual reproduction is nonsense. You would have been a freak. It's not going to happen. So anyway, I'm sorry for the tangent.
Who's that guy over there that hasn't had his head evolve yet?
Barry, my only gift, the only thing I really bring to the Get Real podcast is Glenn is a linear dozer and he makes wonderful notes. And my whole goal in life is just to throw Glenn off his notes. It makes for better radio.
It's been going on now for how many years? Quite a few.
Yeah,
quite a few.
So he is organized and I try to destroy that. And that works.
And it does.
It really works.
It really does.
So I will destroy you. Okay.
One of the other things that I find very interesting and unique and also refreshing about your take on symphonic metal is you don't use a female vocalist. And I understand why the other bands do, because the sound rises above the mix and there's an operatic element to it.
Yeah.
But you use your own male vocals. What made you go that direction?
Well, the simplest answer is because I'm a guy and I have male vocals.
Nicely
Good
done.
answer. Good
Nicely
answer.
done.
Yes.
We picked you for a reason. Yes. Okay.
Well, that's actually something I've wrestled with a lot because I really don't like my voice, and which is a hard thing if you're the one recording yourself and mixing and mastering all that, because you spend a lot of time listening to yourself. I would love to have a voice like Matt Smith from Theocracy, but that's not how God made me. And, I've had to come to terms with that and use what I have to glorify him. And I've even thought about, getting someone to do session vocals. I thought about, switching and writing and arranging for female vocals. And I'm actually, for the next album, I've got a good friend from college. It's in the works to have her appear as a guest vocalist. So I am going to bring in some female guest vocals. but I ended up sticking with my own voice because, it's authentic. It's me with all the rough edges on it. And, not everybody's going to like my music for the sound of it. Not everybody's going to like my music for the content of it. But, it's what I have. So I don't want to make it fake and do something else.
There you go. It's genuine.
Yep. And that's one of the things that I appreciate, especially that comes out in your first album, Bird's Eye View.
Yes.
We were taking a little bit of a listen to that this afternoon, and it's just you. It's honest. It's real. It's you. And I think this is what I said to Dan. It's just you expressing who you are and what's in you. And that's really what draws me a lot to what you do. It's not that, oh, cool, this is symphonic metal. Yeah, I could care less what genre you're doing, but what you're doing is real.
Barry, do you have a favorite instrument?
To play or to listen to?
To play.
I'm actually electric bass is my main instrument, and that kind of.
I guessed that actually.
Yeah, it shows through, and like you mentioned, some of the instrumental Christmas stuff. That's where that comes from.
Do you notice that I'm not much of a bass player, but I do write music, and if I get on a bass and do anything, sometimes it is a real vehicle for songwriting. Do you notice that? Like the bass can really drive a melody or trying to come up with something. It can really, yeah.
I think because it forces you to take a different perspective in your approach to what you're writing.
Yeah.
How about classical music? Most people that are into symphonic metal or perform symphonic metal have some sort of interest in the classics, going back to Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, especially towards the Romantic era of music.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was your first experience with the classical music and composers? Who are you drawn to the most?
Well, I couldn't tell you my first experience just because it was a part of my life. Even from the womb. My mom is actually a classical pianist, and she performed and taught my whole life. So that classical sound was always in the home. We would go to the local college, and anytime there were guest artists or seasonal performances, we would go be a part of that. And a lot of that is how I ended up majoring in music in college, and of course, a lot of that focus is on the classical and tradition and those composers. And my favorites for the big orchestral works, I love Mozart and his later symphonies. I really love Mahler and Schubert. But for piano, of course, Chopin, his preludes and nocturnes they are sublime.
Yeah.
But probably my favorite composer, just from the compositional point of view, would be Bach. And there's so many similarities between Bach and heavy metal, just in terms of how the music works. And that's why you see so many neoclassical stuff done on guitar, and people shredding Bach and Mozart, that stuff. And that's because it works.
Bach was a metalhead. You heard it here.
Yeah, just before electricity.
It really is. And what does it do? Just kind of enlarge the genre, really? I mean, it makes, like, I think that Bach or Beethoven would have freaked out at a symphonic metal show. They would have been like, wow, this is like, like putting a power of 10 to what we were doing in a way.
They would have loved it.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, Dan, I'd like to get Bach to my notes to get a handle on this.
No. Oh, get me out, Barry. I'm going to come stay with you. I can't.
Hey, you got to appreciate a good dad joke.
Yeah, okay. All right.
I could not resist the temptation. I just could not. So, how about film scores? Epic movie music in the cinema. Is that something that's influenced you at all?
Yeah, I mean, some films and composers really grab me, but I'm not really specifically devoted to the genre in particular. But I guess some of my favorite films that just have top-notch scores, Schindler's List.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think is underrated at times. And then, of course, Lord of the Rings and okay, even though this isn't really a film, but the Skyrim soundtrack by Jeremy Soule, that's just fantastic music, top to bottom. And everybody says John Williams, Hans Zimmer, and rightfully so. They're great, but I probably like Williams a little better than Zimmer.
Okay.
And
in my high school years, I really appreciated Danny Elfman.
Yeah. No,
oh yeah.
I really appreciated him. I was so addicted to the Batman soundtrack.
That's a great intro to that theme.
I just could not get enough of that, and that really piqued my interest more into classical music and symphonic music and orchestral music. Was that particular soundtrack? And I remember my dad bought me a Casio keyboard, and I was going to create something as great as what Danny Elfman did with Batman. It never happened. It still might, but
definitely.
It never happened. A lot of times, and I've seen this, and to me it's just a cheap marketing ploy where you see the lists of, well, if you like to listen to such and such band, let's say Kamelot, then a great Christian alternative for you to turn in your Kamelot CDs and trade them out and get this one is, I can't stand those. It's just a ploy. And one of the things that I noticed on your website is that you put yourself out there not as an alternative to these bands, but a unique standard, something that's different, not an alternative, but something that's different. Why do you feel that's so important? How do you stay true to your authenticity?
Oh, well, why would you want to do that? Why be a Christian version of Nightwish? Just listen to Nightwish. I mean, it's been done. They nailed it. It's awesome. And much of my love for the symphonic metal genre is that, all the big bands in that genre have their own twist. The guitar styles are different. The orchestration styles are all different. The vocal styles are all different. Even though, female fronted vocals is kind of predominant, they all do it in different ways. And I could work and study and model my music after one of those bands, but in a genre where each band is so noticeably different, that would stick out like a sore thumb. And it would be so easy to tell, like, hey, this guy is just trying to be another Nightwish and isn't quite as good at it. So
sounds fulfilling.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a sycophantic barnacle on Nightwish. I'm just going to copy everything that they do in my Christian version. That was big in the 80s. There was a lot of metal bands, a lot of things. A lot of them were very talented, and it was a different environment back then because
very different.
It was like you would get persecuted, like metal that was devil's music, right, in the 80s. And there were a lot of them that did kind of copy, who is it? Run to the hills.
Iron Maiden.
Iron Maiden. Yeah, a lot of them copied. Everybody copied Iron Maiden. It was kind of like that.
They were trendsetters.
Yeah. No. That's one thing that I do notice, Glenn, is that most of the artists that do choose metal or symphonic metal, especially in the United States, they're genuine because it's not a cash cow.
No.
Go in there and copy something, you're going to want to make money on it, right? So copy hip hop or copy pop or something that you can make a dime on. But,
I see it a lot on the Christian metal forums. It's like, well, I like this band and I'm not going to listen to it anymore. Does anybody have any suggestions? And I think what it comes down to, and I'm not trying to be mean or condescending, it's like I think a lot of people are afraid that they're going to catch a demon listening to one particular band over another band, where you can go outside and catch a demon just as easily by walking down the street, or listening
going to the wrong church.
Or going to the wrong church. I think there's a lot of fear that's involved with that. And I understand that because, hey, I was there once. After I was saved, I burned my entire CD and tape collection. I mean, we're talking a couple hundred CDs and tapes.
And there is a if you listen to something enough times, whatever worldview they're promoting will start to sink in. So there is a little bit of that, but if you're mature in your faith and, critical in your evaluation of what you're listening to, you can hold up the lyrics, the content of the band you're listening to next to the scripture, and, it's easy to draw what's different and what's on the wrong side of what to believe.
And in a lot of ways, I'm glad I did that at that time and took a step back from rock music and took a step back from metal to grow in the faith. And it wasn't until, just a few years ago, 2010, 2008, 2009, sometime around there, where I started to get back into it again. And it was different. It wasn't like, okay, I need this to adopt a worldview from. It was like,
right.
I'm interested in hearing what is coming out of these people, and it's done so eloquently and so tastefully and so artfully. It's not like, oh yeah, well now I'm going to go live this way. Yep. And now a lot of times when I listen to it, it's like, oh wow, you just gave me another breadcrumb so I can pray for you when I listen listen to the music. So it's different. I don't regret doing that at all, and I understand anybody who's going through that struggle right now. Well, what do I listen to? I get it. But there comes a time to grow and to appreciate God created everything, and you understand where things take that twist that's not of God, and you can deal with that. Paul did that as he grew in his faith as well.
Well, sometimes like right after you're saved, just breaking away from everything, breaking away from you need kind of a honeymoon. You need to be separated.
Absolutely. Your album Reborn, which is your most recent one, and I believe that was released in 2017, correct, Barry?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
That was a full-on symphonic metal album, and I mean, it is just chock full of intense, complex compositions. And you were the one who wrote all of that, you performed all of that, and you produced all of that. How long did it take you to do that?
Oh, well, Reborn as an album, it's a bit of an odd duck. And at least I think when I listen to it, it kind of shows its oddness. Like you said, came out in 2017, but the oldest of the songs on that album I actually wrote back in 2008, and most of them were written between 2008 and 2012. And they were all originally written, just me on my acoustic guitar. I mean, that's all I had. And I was actually halfway through recording that album as a pop rock album when I decided to switch to do symphonic metal. So I was halfway through, about 8 months in. I decided, hey, let's redo this. So, delete everything, start over. And it took me another 8 months to finish. And I do have some regrets there. I mean, I set and published a release date before I'd actually finished recording the music. So to anyone out there listening, that's a mistake. Because then you get down to the end and you're like, oh man, I've got this deadline and it's not ready. And so I kind of rushed it, and lesson learned. But it was about a year and a half to record and produce, start to finish. And I've got an album upcoming planned for later this year, and that one will be at least 3 years start to finish when all is said and done.
Wow, that's a lot of hats to wear.
Yeah.
And it all started out as a hobby for you, didn't it?
Yeah.
And what advice would you give to our listeners who have a hobby, transitioning that from just being a hobby to something that glorifies God?
Just do it. Use it as a way to promote the gospel. Use it as a way to encourage others. Whatever your hobby is, know the Bible so you know how to do your hobby in a way to glorify God. Use it to show your love for God. Use it to show your love for others, and to do what you're gifted at. I think one of the big differences between the Christian worldview and what our culture says, the culture says, you can be whatever you want to be. And that's not true. God created each person the way that they are for a purpose. You are created with certain gifts and abilities to do certain things with them, and I am created with different gifts and abilities to do different things with them. And so, knowing God and knowing yourself are really the two fundamental things to how to live out that purpose, and using whatever your hobby is to glorify God.
It's very well said. But you just shattered my dreams. I guess I'm not going to be an astronaut now.
Man.
Sorry about that.
Oh man, let me just go over and sit and cry in the corner.
I'll never be a figure skater. So.
Gymnast.
Yeah. Funny story there. When I was like in third grade, I really wanted to be a horse racing jockey. But I'm tall. I'm 6'2" now. So when I was in third grade, I was probably 5'2", 5'3", something like that. And I told my doctor, I was like, oh, I want to be a horse racing jockey. He just looked at me. He's like, you can't grow anymore the rest of your life.
That's good.
There are two songs in particular on Reborn that I'd like to talk about a little bit. The first one being The Way. I really like that song. Your vocals on it really draw me into it. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you want the listener to get from listening to that song, The Way?
Oh, well, first, I'm glad you like it. Second, I've got to get credit where credit's due. I didn't write the guitar riff for that song. That was written by a buddy of mine back in college. Shout out to Zach Cuthin if you're listening. We had a little garage band in college, and we collaborated on that one. I mean, the first part of that is recognizing what we can't escape. The world around us is messed up. It's broken. As Christians, we know that's a result of the fall, that our disobedience brought sin into all things, not just into people. And because of that, we ultimately need saving. Not to be saved from some devil that's out to get us, but we need to be saved from our own sin and the results of that sin, our own rebellion and selfishness, and how that wrecks ourselves and it wrecks the people around us. But then, you get to the bridge of the song, and that's intended to be the high point of the song, that we need to be saved, but there is a Savior, and that's Jesus Christ, that he lived the perfect life and died the death that we deserve because we have sinned, and he pays the price so that we don't have to pay that price, so that we can have his righteousness. And just the simple fact of having faith in Christ, that he is Lord and he is Savior, that makes the way for us to be reconciled to God. And that's the gospel in a nutshell, and that's what The Way is about, to get that out there. Hopefully someone listening to that who doesn't believe will hear that and start to question what they see around them and what they see in themselves. And hopefully God will use that to bring somebody to repent and believe.
I got the world
Another song that you have on there is a complete instrumental. It's an overture, and it's Reborn. It's I believe, the title track for your album. And anybody who has had any background in music appreciation takes me back to my days in high school, listening to the Moldau by Smetana, where, you're really trying to understand what he's communicating. What is it that you're communicating instrumentally?
Well, I really hate to disappoint you, but there is no story.
There is no story.
But you're absolutely right. It's very much like a romantic era thing to have these programmatic instrumentals that tell a story, and they have themes and characters and all that. But Reborn, the song, I thought of it and composed it more as an operatic style overture. That it's just a musical sample of each song from the album. So as you listen through it, you get little quotations out of each song.
That's cool.
And
that is cool.
Reminders of what you've just heard, and in a little bit more basic sense, a lot of work goes into the orchestrations of the symphonic parts, and sometimes the metal parts overshadow those. So just an opportunity to let that shine a little bit.
There is a story behind it then.
In that sense,
yeah.
But there's not a different story. have written some programmatic instrumental sections for the new album coming up later this year. And I know I sent you some as a sneak peek,
Yes.
so I don't know if you wanted to listen to that orchestral instrumental section now.
Yes. Well, let's go ahead and share that with our listeners. Is there one in particular that you would like to talk about?
Well, that longer orchestral instrumental clip is it's the story of death and resurrection. So just having that big, simple theme in mind as you listen to it, you will be able to interpret the music and understand what it's saying about death and resurrection.
Let's circle back to the Christmas music for a minute.
Okay.
I told you this guy, you got to watch him. He's like an elf.
You have some songs on there that take me back to my younger years growing up in appreciation
In the
for
North Pole.
in the North Pole.
Oh, I couldn't resist. Okay.
But some of the songs that you have on there, Veni Veni, Emmanuel, you have Lo, How a Rose Air Blooming. Man, that's a mouthful, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's easy to write, but to say. And those were songs that when I was growing up, even before I was born again, I really appreciated because they meant something more than simply having a wonderful Christmas time and, deck the halls with boughs of holly. And there's a place for those, there's time for fun. But really, that's what Christmas is about. How did you select the songs for that? And what's your affinity towards Christmas music in particular?
Well, it's a shame we don't hear songs like that as much anymore. Those songs in particular are much more contemplative and reflective and not happy-go-lucky, holly-jolly Christmas kind of music. Like you said, that's the purpose of Christmas, is to stop and reflect the wonder of the Son of God being born as a man. Yeah. And those two songs are beautiful and rich in their music and in their theology, and I love them. Yeah. And also the strangeness of the lyrics, because they are very old, 1,000 years old, and they've been translated, so the words seem very odd, and it forces us to really actively engage with them if we want to understand them. And my hope for those songs, that project, and for any project, is that they would help whoever's listening to be reflective and contemplative, to ponder the things of God, to know God and love God, and to encourage them as they live out their faith.
I've noticed that whenever you translate ancient things, typically, you do have to, it gets a little awkward, but it's fresh. It's like the words that you use kind of create fresh pathways in the brain, to relate gospel truth, and it kind of bypasses all of the twangy groupthink. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so if you're like, well, and you get your rhythm of what's going on in your church, and you got the way you talk and the way everybody talks, hey, brother, and you got your thing. And then all of a sudden you read something translated from 1,000 years ago, or, 1700 years ago with Saint Augustine or something. Yep. And then it's so refreshing. It switches synapses.
It's old, but it's new.
Yeah.
It's old. Yeah. It's like making an archaeological discovery in a lot of ways.
Totally.
And going back and seeing, there's something about ancient things. People have a affinity. A lot of people have an affinity towards that. It's like, it's a mystery being unraveled.
Right.
In a lot of ways.
Well, also just in between languages, it could be modern, but it's like you have a Chinese Christian expressing something, and then they say it in broken English, and they say it in such a unique way. It hits you really freshly. So
with that being said, if we make it another 1,000 years, what will they be saying about Willie Nelson's Pretty Paper? Kind of scary, isn't it?
We'll see if it survives 1,000 years first.
The way we're going right now, I am not so sure about that.
Really?
I am not so sure. Barry, we are going to feature you this month, the month of July, as Lithos Cry's Artist of the Month. I really appreciate what you're doing, the genuine nature, a lot of talent there. We're going to put your information up on lithoscry.com. That's LITHOSCRY.com. But where can our listeners go to get your music and find out more about you?
The best place to go, my website is reflection-music.com. You can find me, Reflection of Glory, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, kind of. But a little bit of a soapbox here on behalf of all independent musicians. For any independent, local, regional band that you like, go support them directly from their website. Everybody knows how much streaming is a ripoff for artists, but even shopping at iTunes or buying the music from Amazon or whatever, those retailers take a huge cut of the revenue, and for your small, local, regional artists, that's a big deal. It's not such a big deal for the chart toppers, the mega bands, and stuff like that. But so I'll get off my soapbox now. For all the music you love, do what you can to support the artist directly. Anyway, I'll end that rant now.
No, that's good to know, because a lot of people don't realize that when they buy something from iTunes or Amazon, that all that money is not going towards you. You don't have a jet. You're not living the glam rock lifestyle off of that.
Oh no. Oh no, not even close. I would, and to be honest, I wouldn't want the rock star lifestyle. That's not why I do it. The goal is not for me to get rich and famous, but the goal is for me to make good music that honors God and is great to listen to.
Yeah, Dan and we ain't doing this to make bank either, so.
Yeah.
I don't know about you.
We need to talk afterwards.
Oh, man.
Barry, thank you so much for being with us.
Hey, thanks for having me. I've loved being on, especially, I've had a chance to listen to you guys, and it's been fun to be here.
He's listened to us and he agreed to be on the podcast with us.
I'm tired of eking my way through life, Harry. Yeah, someone finally. No, thank you, Barry. It's been a great interview, and I really enjoyed the bass work, man, on that Christmas album. Sweet.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
So.
And for our listeners, if you have any questions for Dan and you can reach us at lithoscry, LITHOSCRY @gmail.com, and you can check us out at lithoscry.com.
And Glenn's going to drink some maple syrup and make Christmas ornaments.
lithoscry.com